Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Zach from ZenForce TCG. Today I wanted to do a deep dive into 151, specifically some of the higher end singles, because I think there is some interesting data points to look at between English and Japanese, which I don't think we historically see such close values between those two languages, but there is some nuance to that and some exceptions. But let's just dive right into it. So quickly, I want to go over the sealed products. So currently in English, 151 booster packs are around $10. The bundles are around $70, which comes out to about $12 a pack. ETBs are $242, $243, which is pretty pricey. On the Japanese side, we have pretty much between like $130 to $150 a box, I would say. On the higher end, if it's $150, that comes out to about $7.50 a pack if there's 20 packs, I believe. Someone can double check my math on that. The main topic that I want to go over, and I'm just going to keep cruising along, is there is not really much of a discrepancy anymore between the Japanese, or this is the English, but between the English 151 high-end SIRs, mainly Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, and the Japanese ones. English and Japanese, very similar in price. I will caveat this by saying that TCG Player is fairly new to listing Japanese cards, so there's not as much volume, and also it doesn't have as long of a price history, but I'll show you some eBay sales to show you that it's still pretty consistent there as well. So if we look at the English copies, we have Charizard sitting at $192 market price, Blastoise $61 to $62, Venusaur at $53. In Japanese, Charizard at $196, again on TCG Player specifically, Venusaur at $67.50, which is actually higher than Blastoise for Japanese, and Blastoise sitting almost at $67. Just to show you guys what it looks like on eBay, here's Charizard, again, in that, let's say, 160, 170, up all the way to about 190 range. Some best offers being accepted, some higher, some lower. And then you have Japanese. Same ballpark, 160, 170, 180, 190. And really what I'm trying to demonstrate or illustrate here is that if we look at some of these older charts, I've pulled up both Charizard in Japanese and English. Again, TCG Player has had some high sales, but what I really want to point out is when you look at the peak of 151, especially the Charizard, it peaked between the end of February, early March at about $291. We look at the same peak for Japanese was about $196. So that's almost $100 difference between the raw value of the raw market price of the Japanese and the English copies. Now, 6 months later, they're almost neck and neck. And the kicker here is that everyone's aware, Japanese, the card quality is so much better. So in English, the PSA 10s are going for around $650 to $700, whereas the Japanese is almost like, honestly, the 10s are probably a decent pickup possibly right now, just relative to the raw price. Even though the raws grade so well, they're only selling for like $250 to $300. So the main reason for that, obviously, again, is when you look at the 10s versus 9s, English, less than 50% of these cards being sent in for all the SIRs, and most of the IRs too, are less than 50% 10 gem rate. So here you can see 18,500 10s, 28,000 9s, whereas with Japanese, we have 26,000 10s, 3,000 9s. So it's like 90% 10 rate for Japanese. The purpose of this video is not to really show the graded stuff as much as the raw, which I usually am not like a huge advocate for raw cards in this stance, but I do think there's some plays forming in the market. And I do think 151, it's close to being out of rotation with the rest of the G block, which I think is Scarlet Violet base, Paldea Evolved, Obsidian Flames, and 151. Next year in April, I believe they will rotate out. And that means 151 is approaching, or I think it's crossed 2 years old, but either approaching or crossed 2 years old. And 2, it's not going to get printed that much longer beyond that. So it's still in very high demand. The singles are obviously in very high demand. Obviously, the populations are very, very high, but the gem rates are not very favorable, I would say. And we historically don't see English and Japanese being so close in price, in my opinion. And in some cases, the Japanese is exceeding the English price. So there might be something going on that I'm not aware of. So if you guys know something about English versus Japanese that, I'm not aware of, let me know down in the comments. But I think probably part of it is just that Pokemon Company is still printing 151 bundles and Blooming Waters, I believe. ETBs have been consistently going up because they haven't gotten reprinted, but there's still a lot of packs out there. But I would caveat that by saying there was tons of Japanese 151 booster boxes printed as well. But just to illustrate my point further, again, Blastoise, I would say, is between 60 to 70 bucks. There's a lot of best offers accepted here, but these are all the English ones. Japanese, very similar price, 50, 60, 70 bucks. Higher and lower in some cases. But really what I'm trying to illustrate is that the gap between English and Japanese is pretty much non-existent here, which historically it has been. Again, I'm pulling up the 6 month just to show the peaks. So Blastoise peaked close to $90 back in March. And it was about 70-ish. Is that right? Yeah, early March is about 70. So a little bit closer than Charizard, but still like a, what is that, 10, 20% difference at least? Actually, that's more, like a 30%, 20 to 30% difference. So now they're pretty much neck and neck. And the whole reason I'm bringing this up is not to tell you to start pumping 151 again, buying all the singles, that sort of thing. It's just really to bring your attention to some interesting data points. And it feels like there's some sort of market, like not disruption, but like, we're not used to seeing English and Japanese being so neck and neck. I feel like especially for such popular cards, usually because the Japanese grade so much better, the raws will be cheaper too. But at this point, I think it's just such a high demand set and will continue to be such a high demand set that maybe this is just dissolved with 151. But I do think over time the English will still probably be king. But yeah, and same thing with Venusaur. Peaked around $87 and was actually at a low around then, 63. So yeah, like a 20-30% difference between English and Japanese. But now they're neck and neck. $63 most recent sale on TCG Player for Japanese, $54 or $55 for English. So it's actually more expensive in Japanese than in English. You can see that on eBay as well. English mostly between 45 to 60-ish dollars. Japanese, some of these are Korean, so let's just pick some of these out. 59 best offer accepted. So again, neck and neck at this point. These are Korean. 60, 60, 63, 72, 88, 69. Neck and neck. And so I just thought it was an interesting. I feel like I don't see a lot of people talking about this right now. I don't know, again, if there's something that I'm missing or not privy to. I checked it with like Surging Sparks, English versus Japanese, and English is still pretty far ahead on most cards. There's a few where they're neck and neck, but I do think that right now could be a good time to pick up some of these 151 singles. So I did want to just quickly add, because I always forget that with Japanese, they do have the guaranteed pull rates on the illustration rares, I believe. So that is a big reason why a lot of the illustration rares are so much cheaper than the English 151. So just keep that in mind. I would not be suggesting you guys buy illustration rares or make speculative plays on those. That's just my opinion. I do think the SIRs are a little bit of a different case. I don't know the exact pull rates for Japanese, if it's like one per box or whatever. It's kind of irrelevant at this point, just because in English they are not super easy to pull and the card conditions are really bad usually. And so I was just trying to draw the distinction between the prices of English and Japanese. So just keep that in mind. I'm recording this after the fact and just wanted to add it in real quick. The illustration rares, I will just quickly touch on and say that they are, English still blows the Japanese art rares out of the water in terms of price point. So, the English Charmander is 40, Squirtle 37, Bulbasaur 30, and the Japanese ones are 12, 9, and 8 respectively. So way cheaper in Japanese. Again, I don't know what's going on with the SIRs that's causing them to be so much higher in Japanese, especially when the 10s are very cheap and affordable. I showed you the Charizards. English was $650 to $700 for that in a 10, and then the Japanese is like $250, $300. The Blastoise and Venusaur, it's like they're like $100 each in a 10 in Japanese. and English is like 250-ish, 200 to 250-ish, I believe, for each of them. So not trying to call out that huge multiple. The raw price gaps don't make as much sense to me personally. I think it's an interesting data point. At the next shows that I have in July that I'll be vending, I will definitely be picking up these SIRs at 80% if people are selling them for that. It feels like a no-brainer to me, especially with the set going out of rotation in the coming year. And product probably will become more difficult to find from that point forward, just in the sense of what's out there is out there. They probably won't be printing much more. Maybe they throw it into a few different products here and there, but it's my understanding that this is one of the most popular sets of all time right now. And so, there are people probably with huge positions of packs and sealed products, but it's also one of the most popular sets ripped live on live streams. So anyways, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. I'd be interested to hear your takes. Japanese versus English, how do you feel about it? Is this like an anomaly, or do you see this with other sets? I checked just a few other sets, and it didn't seem to be as close as we're seeing with 151. I didn't check all the other specialty sets, though, which I probably should have done, but to my knowledge, this is not something we see super often, or at least it hasn't been the norm for the last couple years with the market. So anyways, that's all I got today, guys. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment down below, and I'll catch you all in a new one soon. Peace.